Rainbow Magic presents Juliet the Valentine Fairy by Daisy Meadows. Special edition, more fairy fun than ever. Let's see what Jack Frost and his goblins are up to. Ooh, Valentine cool stuff. You can give roses, hearts, chocolates, or cool flowers. Nice.
Juliet the Valentine Fairy, Rainbow Magic Special Edition. Juliet the Valentine Fairy by Daisy Meadows. More fairy fun than ever.
Guys, that means more fairy fun than ever. I love that.
Late for a date. Kirsty Tate paced from the front hall to the kitchen and back again. She pulled aside the curtain and looked out the window. There was still no sign of her best friend, Rachel Walker. Kirsty glanced at the grandfather clock in the corner and sighed. The Valentine's card workshop had already started. Why was Rachel so late? Kirsty stared out the window, hoping the Walkers' familiar station wagon would magically appear. But she knew that she couldn't just make magic happen. The truth was, she and Rachel knew a lot about magic. They had learned about it from their good friends, the fairies. The two girls had first met on a trip to Rainspell Island, where they helped the 7 rainbow fairies who had been sent away from fairyland by the wicked Jack Frost. Rachel and Kirsty made a great team. The king and queen of fairyland came to rely on the girls whenever Jack Frost and his goblins were causing trouble. Kirsty was happy that the fairies could trust them, and she knew she could trust Rachel too. She couldn't help smiling when she spotted the station wagon turning down her street. As the car pulled into the Tate's driveway, Rachel waved cheerfully to Kirsty, who hurried out to help with her friend's bag. Rachel kissed her mom goodbye. "Hello, Kirsty," Mrs. Walker said. She turned back to her daughter. "Rachel, please call and let me know what time I should pick you up on Sunday." Rachel nodded and waved as her mom drove off. "I'm so glad you're here," Kirsty said, hugging her best friend. "I was starting to worry." Rachel frowned and tilted her head to the side. "We'll just put your bag in my room and go straight to the art center," Kirsty continued. "But I thought the Valentine workshop was after dinner," Rachel said, looking confused. "No," Kirsty replied. She couldn't help feeling a little annoyed. "But we should still have a little time," she added hopefully. "Let's tell my dad we're ready to go." The two friends dropped Rachel's bag upstairs and headed to the kitchen. Through the window over the sink, they could see Kirsty's father working in the backyard. Kirsty poked her head out the back door. "Dad, can you take us to the art center now?" she asked. "Rachel's here." Mr. Tate looked up from a pile of wood and chicken wire. "Hi, Rachel," he called. Then he wiped his forehead with his sleeve and looked at Kirsty. "I completely forgot that I was supposed to take you girls to the class. It's so nice out. I started making the new compost bin for your mom." He glanced down at the pile of building supplies and furrowed his brow. "I still have a lot to do, and I've made a big mess. Do you think you girls could ride bikes to the art center?" Kirsty felt a frown tug at the corners of her mouth. She had left her dad a note. Why did he forget? And how would she ever make a Valentine's card with so little time? She wanted to be angry with him, but then she looked at the blue sky and sighed. "It is very nice out for February," she admitted. Rachel nodded in agreement. I'll pick you up afterward, and we'll put the bikes in the trunk," Mr. Tate said. "Okay. The workshop is over at 6:30, replied Kirsty. "See you then." Mr. Tate gave his daughter a warm smile and watched as she grabbed her friend's hand and ran back inside the house. "You can ride my new bike," Kirsty offered as they skipped down the garage steps. She pointed to her purple road bike with a green straw basket on the front. Once Rachel swung her leg over the bar and had one foot on a pedal, Kirsty grabbed the handlebars of a yellow bike with pink flowers on it. "This one was my cousin's. It's a little small, but I can still ride it," Kirsty said. She grinned. "And I bet I can beat you there." Workshop woes. After a quick ride into Weatherbury Village, Kirsty and Rachel turned off the sidewalk and into the Art Center parking lot. Like many of the other buildings at Weatherbury College, the Art Center had a slate roof and stained glass windows. "It's beautiful," Rachel said, climbing off her bike. "Our class is on the third floor," Kirsty said, turning the key on her bike lock. The girls ran up the stairs to the classroom. A tall man with a shaggy red beard greeted them. "Hello, Kirsty," he said. "And you must be Rachel." The man nodded as he marked their names on his clipboard. "Hello, Mr. Snuffer," Kirsty said. "I'm sorry we're late." Mr. Snuffer shook his head. "No worries, dear. All the art supplies are out on the tables," he said. "You still have plenty of time to make something from the heart." Kirsty and Rachel looked at each other, trying not to giggle. "Oh my," Mr. Snuffer chuckled, looking around at all the hearts on the other kids' Valentines cards. "From the heart. That's funny." "Yes," Kirsty said, giggling. "It is funny." Then she walked to a table with 2 open seats and picked out some paper and markers. She turned to Rachel. "I want to make my parents a special card. They do so much for me, and I thought it would be nice to say thanks." "Yeah, except your dad wouldn't drive us here," Rachel mumbled. Her eyebrows shot up as she glanced over at Kirsty. Her friend was just as surprised as Rachel was that she had said that. "I'm sorry, Kirsty," Rachel gasped. "I really didn't mean it that way." Kirsty nodded and bit her lip. She had been annoyed with her dad too, but she didn't like to hear her friend criticizing him. She didn't say anything though, and went back to making her card. At the next table, 2 friends began arguing loudly. "You're copying me," declared a girl with short brown hair. "I was using the star stickers first," the other girl replied. "No, you weren't." The 2 girls scowled at each other until one pushed her chair back loudly and stood up. "Fine, I'm changing tables," she huffed, heading off to find a new seat. Almost immediately, Kirsty and Rachel heard another disagreement coming from a different table. "Stop kicking me," a boy's voice carried across the room. "Jackson? Andrew? What seems to be the problem?" Mr. Snuffer asked. Kirsty glanced over and saw 2 boys from her school giving each other icy stares. "They're best friends," Kirsty whispered to Rachel in shock. "They never fight." The girls locked eyes. Do you think something funny is going on?" Rachel asked. "It seems that way," Kirsty answered, raising an eyebrow. "You're right," a tiny voice sang out so only Rachel and Kirsty could hear. "What?" Rachel and Kirsty both said, each glancing at the other. "You're right," the small, sweet voice said again. "Something funny is going on." After a pause, the voice became serious. "Well, it's actually not funny at all." The 2 girls peered around the room until their eyes fell upon a fairy. She was so small that she was hiding in a glass jar of glitter, right in front of them on the table. "Oh, hello," Rachel gasped. Kirsty immediately folded a large piece of construction paper and propped it up on the table so no one else could see their fairy friend. As soon as the coast was clear, the fairy fluttered out of the jar. She unfolded her wings, and a mix of craft sparkles and magical heart sparkles swirled around her. Her long brown hair fell in waves past her shoulders, and she wore a wide-necked pink sweater and a jean skirt with 2 hearts stitched to the front. Her beaded necklace had a red heart pendant. But more than anything, Kirsty and Rachel noticed the pretty fairy's deep brown eyes, which were brimming with tears. Juliet's story. Kirsty and Rachel, the fairy said, sighing. I'm so lucky I found you. It's the only good thing that's happened all day. A single tear ran down one of her rosy cheeks. Kirsty and Rachel looked at the little fairy with concern. Oh, please forgive me, the fairy said, perking up a bit. I know your names, but you don't know mine. She brushed the extra sparkles from her skirt, and bent her knees in a little curtsy. I'm Juliet, the Valentine fairy. It's my job to make sure that Valentine's Day is full of love and happiness, both in fairyland and the human world. But I'm afraid I've messed up everything this year. Oh, Juliet, I'm sure it's not that bad, Rachel said, trying to reassure the fairy. Oh, but it is. Juliet's tone was very dramatic. Friends and families are fighting. Sweethearts are falling out of love. People are not thinking about one another's feelings. She pulled out a pink tissue and sniffled. Everything that makes Valentine's Day special is coming apart. She buried her face in her hands. Tell us what happened, Kirsty suggested. Maybe we can help. Juliet raised her head. I was finishing making this year's Valentines when I heard some beautiful music. I went outside to see where it was coming from, but no one was there. When I went back into my cottage, I discovered that all 3 of my magical Valentine's Day presents were gone. The fairy's shoulders slumped. Kirsty and Rachel could see that it was hard for her to tell this story. I grabbed my wand and raced out the back door. A band of goblins was running down the lane. I tried to stop them, but I couldn't cast a spell because my fingers were still too sticky from the glue I'd used. As soon as I got a good grip on my wand, the spell came. The spell came barreling out. But just then, Jack Frost appeared, and he cast a spell that rocketed straight at mine. The 2 spells collided and spun into a whirlwind of magic right above the goblins. Juliet twirled her hands around, mimicking the magical storm. Now my presents are lost somewhere in the human world. If I don't find them and return them to fairyland, Valentine's Day won't be the same.
So guys, we don't know if we're going to get the second one in time. So we will just probably arrange them. Don't worry, we'll get the second one and the third one. And the fourth one and the fifth one. We'll get all of them. And we have more special editions that we'll get more of. Okay, let's move on.
But just then, Jack Frost appeared, and he cast a spell that rocketed straight at mine.
But guys, one more thing. Don't forget to write in the comments what your fairy goal is. Mine is to get all the fairies, rainbow fairies, wet. Tell us what your favorite fairy is in the comments and which series you like best. Also, one more thing. You write what's your favorite book is from the collection. Also, don't forget to write some extra sponsors that you will like.
Juliet twirled her hands around, mimicking the magical storm. Now my presents are lost somewhere in the human world. If I don't find them and return them to Fairyland, Valentine's Day won't be the same. What happens if you don't get the presents back? Rachel asked. Jack Frost's spell ensures that every card or present will have the opposite effect of what it should. Juliet shook her head in disbelief. This time he's giving the goblins a wand that can mix up messages. They're using it to change the meanings of emails and notes. It's a mess. Kirsty and Rachel felt their hearts sink. They had already seen what could happen. Friends were fighting, and Kirsty thought about how she had been annoyed with her dad. Normally, she would have been more understanding. You both need to know this, Juliet announced seriously. The 3 missing presents stand for 3 kinds of love. First, the Valentine's card represents family love. Second, the fairy said, counting on her fingers, is the red rose. It stands for sweetheart love. And the final present is the box of super sweet candy hearts. Those are for friendship, of course. Each present is tied with a sparkly red ribbon. Both girls thought of all the special kinds of love. They couldn't let them be ruined. We have to do something, declared Rachel. I would love your help, Juliet replied, giving the girls a tiny smile. But we have to let the magic come to us, you know. Let's be on the lookout. Jack Frost told his goblins to do whatever they had to do so that we wouldn't get the magical presents back. Kirsty nodded, remembering how Fairyland magic worked. The presents needed to be back in Fairyland before the holiday would be magical again. I guess you girls should work on your Valentines for now, Juliet said, shrugging. At least until we find a clue, or until the goblins find us. No good goblins. Kirsty took Juliet's advice and immediately went back to making her Valentine. She wasn't ready for a fairy adventure yet. She still had to finish her parents' card. She reached in front of Rachel to grab more pipe cleaners and tissue paper. Rachel frowned as Kirsty picked out the art supplies. She couldn't understand why her friend wasn't more worried about the missing presents. Didn't she care? Why are you even bothering with that silly card? Rachel asked. If we don't hurry up and find Juliet's presents, it won't matter if you finish it or not. Kirsty's jaw dropped and her eyes narrowed. If you hadn't been so late, I wouldn't have to hurry, she replied quietly. Oh, girls, please, don't argue, pleaded Juliet. Jack Frost's magic will work against you two, since you're best friends. You might say and do things you normally wouldn't, all because the Valentine presents are missing. Kirsty and Rachel both looked down. They were embarrassed. Of course, Juliet was right. An upbeat attitude was the way to get the best of the goblins. They couldn't let silly arguments stop them. I want some more decorations for my card, Kirsty suddenly announced, studying her Valentine. She stood up and walked over to Mr. Snuffer's desk. Immediately, Juliet flitted to Rachel's shoulder. We should follow her, whispered the fairy. It's best to stick together. Rachel quickly stood up, and Juliet fluttered to her shoulder to hide behind her hair. Rachel was relieved to be doing something other than arts and crafts, but she really wanted to be tracking down those no-good goblins. Why, Kirsty, Mr. Snuffer said, Your card is lovely." "Thank you," replied Kirsty. She'd done a lot of work on her card so far. The front had delicate tissue paper flowers clustered into the shape of a heart and drizzled with red and pink glitter. Instead, she had written a poem to her parents. It was a very pretty card, but Kirsty couldn't help feeling like something was missing. "I was hoping to add a little something else," she explained to her teacher. "Do you have any scraps of ribbon or paper from our project last week?" "Oh, yes," said Mr. Snuffer with an understanding smile. "You'll find what you're looking for in the scrap bin in the hall closet." Kirsty grinned and headed across the room and out the door. Rachel followed just a few steps behind. "Wait, Kirsty," she called, but her friend didn't hear. Rachel stepped into the hallway just as Kirsty opened the supply closet door. At once, a big box of art supplies fell on Kirsty's head, and 2 goblins tumbled out of the closet door. Out of the closet, Rachel noticed that one goblin clutched a pink card with a sparkly red ribbon looped around it. The other goblin held a long, skinny wand. As the goblins scrambled to their feet, Rachel rushed forward to help her friend. "My card," Juliet cried, pointing from her perch on Rachel's shoulder. "That goblin has it." As Rachel lifted the box off Kirsty's head, colorful fabric and paper scraps fell to the ground. "Are you okay?" she asked, worried. "Yes, let's catch those goblins," Kirsty cried. As the girls ran down the hallway, Juliet peeked over Rachel's shoulder and twirled her wand. Magically, the box of art materials floated back into the closet with the paper and fabric scraps safely inside. "The goblins are fast," Rachel yelled, stumbling down the art center stairs. The heavy main door scraped open when Kirsty pushed it. The sky was growing dark as the sun set. The girls searched the campus sidewalks for the goblins, but they could not even hear any footsteps. It was almost like the goblins had simply disappeared. "But they had my Valentine's Day card. What will we do now?" asked Juliet.
Don't worry, we'll take a few pictures.
"A simple swap." "Don't worry, Juliet," Rachel
Just
said.
joking. We didn't take pictures. I meant, don't want to use up all the film.
"A simple swap. Don't worry, Juliet," Rachel said. "We'll help you get your card back." "That's right," agreed Kirsty, walking up to a large map of the campus. "Maybe this will give us an idea where the goblins went." "It can give us more than an idea," Juliet cried, flying off of Rachel's shoulder. "I think this map can tell us exactly where to find them." She straightened her skirt and lifted her wand. "Little hearts, be our guide. Show us where the goblins hide." A cluster of heart sparkles burst out of Juliet's wand and whizzed straight to the map, landing on Darden Hall. "Darden Hall is a small old theater," Kirsty said. "It's right over there." Juliet followed Kirsty's gaze and immediately flew toward the tall brick building. The girls ran behind her, right up the front steps. The carved wooden door creaked as Kirsty pulled it open. At once, no, stop.
It's a blankie, it's a blankie, it's a blankie.
It's not going to come apart like that. Stop taking it apart like that.
I get it.
Just lay it on you.
It is like a little sleeping bag to
It's
me.
not, though.
You can
Would you use it
mold
like a blanket, please? At once, the three friends could hear the two goblins' voices arguing. They were standing at the front of the theater and on a small stage. Juliet and the girls snuck inside and peeked out from behind the last row of red cushioned seats. "Why did you mix up the message on the card?" asked the goblin with big feet. "Jack Frost told us to mix up all messages, especially Valentines," the other goblin grumbled. "Well, we can't read it, so we don't know if it's real. We can't take it to Jack Frost like this." The first goblin pouted. "It doesn't even have a sparkly red ribbon."
I like it this way. This is how I come the book. And it's super cool. And I want to stay.
Julie, Rachel, and Kirsty looked at one another with wide eyes. The goblins didn't know that they had the real magical card. Rachel leaned into her friends and spoke as quietly as she could. "I think we would have spotted the ribbon if it had fallen off on the way here. So the ribbon is probably somewhere in the theater," Kirsty mused. The girls peered over the chairs and peeked down the aisle, searching for the ribbon. Juliet flitted into the air for a fairy's eye view, being careful to stay out of sight of the goblins. With an excited twirl, she swooped down behind a row of seats. When the fairy reappeared, the red ribbon trailed behind her in the air. Kirsty had to remind herself not to cheer out loud when Juliet dropped the ribbon safely in her lap. "Now we have the ribbon," she whispered, "but we still don't have the card." "We have a card, though," Rachel declared. "Pass me the ribbon." Kirsty placed the red ribbon in her friend's hand. "Now hold out the card you made for your parents." Kirsty clenched the flowery card tightly. Even though they'd made a mad dash from the art center, she had managed to keep it crisp and clean. "Oh, I don't know," Juliet began, watching Kirsty's face carefully. It was clear how much Kirsty liked her card. "It's okay," Kirsty said. "I trust Rachel." She handed the card over and watched as her friend tied the red ribbon around it. "Now, here's the plan," Rachel announced, her eyes sparkling. She explained how they would trick the goblins. "Kirsty, just follow my lead. And Juliet, don't let them know you're here." The two friends snuck back to the entrance of the theater unseen. Then they stood up and acted as if they had just walked in. Juliet hid on Rachel's shoulder again. "We're so lucky that we found the magic card," Rachel said loudly, trying to get the goblins' attention. "Now we can just hide in the theater until we know the goblins are gone." Kirsty could hardly breathe. Out of the corner of her eye, she watched as the goblins on stage listened to what Rachel had said. "Yes," she added, "Juliet will be so happy to have her card back." "Oh, no you don't," shouted the goblin, holding the wand. "That card is ours," the other goblin yelled. "Quick, do a spell." He nudged his goblin friend. The first goblin pointed his wand at Kirsty's pretty card and chanted, "Whatever leaves fairyland and ends up lost should always belong to Jack Frost." "That's a horrible spell," the other goblin scoffed. "It's too short. It won't work." But suddenly the card floated out of Rachel's hand and zipped through the air toward the goblins. "It's working," they declared, jumping up and down and looking goofy. Juliet giggled as she kept her wand pointed at the card. It was Juliet's magic that was carrying the card to the goblins, not their silly spell. But the goblins thought they had snatched the magical card from the girls. "No," Rachel yelled. "I found it first." She raced toward the stage, pretending to be very upset. "It's ours," the big-footed goblin said, holding the card tightly. "We get the pretty magic card. You can have this silly one." He threw the real magic card at Rachel. Then both goblins yelped with glee as they stumbled off the stage and ran out of the theater. Rachel picked up the card and carried it back down the aisle to Juliet. "Thank you so much, Rachel," Juliet said. "Your plan worked perfectly. I can take my card back to Fairyland. Now families everywhere can enjoy Valentine's Day together. With the twirl of my wand, the message will no longer be mixed up." With that, she waved her wand and shrunk the card back to Fairyland size. The message on the front now read, "Happy Valentines." Kirsty couldn't help smiling at their new fairy friend. She was thrilled that they had helped Juliet get her card back, but she felt a little disappointed that the goblins had taken her card. She'd just have to make another one. "We just have 2 more presents to go," Rachel said with a grin. "Don't worry, Juliet. We'll find them, no matter what." Kirsty gave Juliet a big wave as the fairy disappeared in a beautiful burst of sparkly red hearts. Then Kirsty heard the honk of her family's car. She and Rachel ran outside to see Mr. Tate pulling up nearby in front of the art center. Kirsty smiled at her dad as she went to unlock her bike. She was happy to see him, and even happier that she and Rachel had helped Juliet track down one of her missing Valentine's Day presents. The end.
Can you believe Kirsty and Rachel fight it? Okay, this is Juliet, the Valentine Fairy. Part 1, more fairy fun than ever. We'll be going on to Juliet Book 2 with the sweetheart one. Okay? With the love one. With the rose. See ya. Now this is a sponsor. The sponsor is of birthday. Is the library system. Throughout the world, the library has the library system. Library system. Thanks for listening, guys. Please comment what did you like the most about the book and do all the questions I asked. And then you should subscribe to our channel.